Hi everyone, my name is Selin Thomas. It's been lovely to meet all of you this weekend. I feel so lucky to be here among you. And thank you, Pulitzer Center, for the edits. Okay, so my project was Syrian refugees in Turkey. I became interested in this topic after my mother's Turkish, and I've been traveling to Turkey for a very long time. And I don't come from a religious family, but the increasing anti-Islam rhetoric that I've been confronted with was really starting to get under my skin, especially in the context of the Syrian refugee crisis and the civil war. So I wrote a proposal, which ended up circling back in a really unexpected way. And my project focused on people on the sidelines of this conflict, bombs dropping, and the revolutionaries. So I got to Turkey. Nothing really went the way I needed it to. And so I sort of had to think on my feet a little and get the stories that I was interested in writing. This had a lot to do with my lack of access to actual refugee camps. I was only there for 3 weeks, and when I got there, I had all my ducks in a row, I had all my paperwork, I had my press pass. I'd been approved by the Turkish consulate in the United States, but I wasn't when I got there. They wouldn't let me in. So I had to find refugees elsewhere, and they are living in really dire circumstances outside of the camps. The camps are by no means, luxury, but outside of them, these people are undocumented. They're not receiving any health care. They're not receiving any food, water. They can't speak the language, and they're poor. They're really, really poor. So I started talking to people, and what I found was sort of surprising. I wanted to share stories of people that identified with Syria, and they all did. They loved their country, and who were making new ways for themselves in a new country because they were forced out. And these people welcomed me into their home, into their very small cement homes, and offered me their last bits of tea and their last cookies, and told me what they had been through. And by and large, they were horrific things. But like I said, resilient people, very open and kind and happy. The people that I spoke with were happy or were lucky, and they were appreciative of the life that they still had after witnessing so much atrocity. So I guess I want to focus what I'm talking about on my experience as a journalist. Although it was the first time that I've really been attached to a story in this way. And I was a little disillusioned as a journalism major at school. I was really excited about it, and then all of a sudden wasn't anymore. And when I found the Pulitzer Center, and they let me write the stories that I wanted to write, and in the ways that I wanted to write, with narrative passion sort of behind it. I sort of got a fire lit under me again after writing a lot of deep reporting, boring stuff. Good experience though. Anyway, so I guess I'll share with you a couple of these people's stories. These are three of 15 kids living in a very small house. And they came across the border with their families in the middle of the night. They're related, but I don't know, it's a complicated story. But they came across the border, and they're building a school here in this town for Syrian kids to learn Turkish so that they can live the rest of their lives in Turkey, because they're not planning on getting back anytime soon. So this family was just the craziest family I've ever met. There were 30 of them running around the house, and they had a lot to say about the conflict. And I guess that's where the research that I did here comes in, because I was very familiar with the components of the conflict. But they wanted to tell what their daily lives were like. They wanted to tell me about going to the market and how hard it was to communicate with people there, how they were being charged extortionate prices, those sorts of things. And they did, and I was really surprised as as a Turkish person to witness the increased xenophobia in the area based on these refugees. People were convinced that they were bringing diseases and that they were taking resources and that they were they're not welcome. So they're living in a really shitty situation. I'm sorry. They're living in a really unfortunate situation. Classic. And another story that I wrote was on a school that I sort of happened upon walking down the road, and it looked so lively, and I was confused because it was summer, and I learned after really drilling into these people and coming back day after day and asking for their permission and they opened up and they told me that they were actually a school for orphaned or seriously traumatized kids, and they were only being temporarily loaned this school for the summer, and a lot of the kids hadn't been in school for 3 years, 2 to 3 years, and this was the first time that they were receiving any type of education. So that's a really good big picture, because you can see all of these faces, and they're all holding up these signs, and these kids are so aware of what's going on in their country, and they're so passionate about it. When I first went for a full day, they were singing songs of the revolution, songs, anti-Assad songs, and very passionately. One of the girls was really crying. They were patting each other on the backs. Just, I don't know. It was such an incredible thing to see. And they're learning in classrooms. They're learning Turkish, which is probably one of the most important things that they can be taught right now. But they're also learning math. They're still in Arabic classes and things like that. And I was also, when I was here reporting, I was really struck by by the ability of photographs to tell a story, because I had never really held up a camera in any serious way. And it was awesome to post these photos on Instagram and see the response from people, particularly when I posted a photo that's not actually in the slideshow of a man named Muhammad, which of course his name was Muhammad, and his beard was down here and his hair was long, and he probably looks exactly like what all my friends told me to be careful when I went. And he was an engineering student, and he had been out of school for a year, and he was just about to finish his degree when the war broke out. And I posted this photo, and people's responses were just, wow, I'm so surprised that was an engineering student. As if they'd really never seen, a religious or Arabic person at all that was just like you and me. So I I tried to tell the stories of these people living on the periphery through those images, and hopefully my words to liken them to the rest of the world, because you are bombarded on the news with the conflict and the bombs and the fighters, but you never really see the people that are, living in squalor on the side of the road, taking care of 15 kids. So I was really fortunate to have that experience. Also, it was really interesting to see people's response to me as a person, me as a journalist. One of the things that was really great is they wanted to see their photos after I took them, and they got so excited when I showed it to them. So this goes back to what some of the panelists were saying about, showing your work to the people that are opening their lives to you, and showing them where it's going to be and where they can see it, and hopefully sort of impacting their daily life and sharing their stories. Just to wrap up a little, I'm going to read you guys what started out as a journal entry, and thank you, Kim, for making it presentable. And it does a way better job of explaining what I'm trying to say. So I will just read it to you. It's really short, don't worry. Of all the things I've seen here in Eastern Turkey, among countless Syrian refugees, bearing witness to stories of incredible grief, horror, pain, and luck, the most startling has been the smiles, hundreds of them, unsolicited, unapologetic. What reasons have these people to smile? Yet in the darkened cement rooms of their derelict homes, once cow stables, in abandoned villages near crop fields where they can sometimes find a day's work, sometimes not, and far from social consciousness, they smile. On the playground of a temporary school, traumatized to silence from seeing corpses limp in the streets of their ravaged homeland, they smile. Having fled their shelled neighborhoods with nothing but the clothes on their backs and sometimes each other, they smile. Insecure, in an insecure semi-reality, they smile. But asking the reason is naive, for the answer is obvious. At its most absolute, when the distracting varnish of civilization is stripped or violently torn away, the calloused, contented wound of humanity is reopened, exposing a bloodied, raw human condition in which a smile is the highest currency. You see, our nature is far more resilient, courageous, and inexplicably compassionate than we realize, or at least than we've become accustomed to, and far less pessimistic, selfish, and ornate than we've come to expect. This realization is not in any way meant to diminish the strength of spirit each of these individuals has exhibited during such an extraordinary struggle, but to instead connect their unlikely joy. It is joy in the wake of the ceaseless civil conflict which has displaced their very existence. What reassurance to see the most disadvantaged of us, the persecuted, the mournful, and the lost, carry the leaden weight of hope on their backs. Not only to see them, no, that would not suffice, but to actually envy them. The injustice of what has happened to them is nearly incalculable, far beyond the tempting pursuit of reason or rational interpretation many of us feel inclined toward. Compelling indeed, enough to force us to question the progress we, the human race, have made. But then, the smile. No amount of bloodshed, cruelty, darkness can quell this light, this nature of ours, so we smile, unassured but hopeful that there will continue to be fuel behind it, that it may illuminate the human condition beyond our mere mortality for those who have neglected or forgotten it entirely. Then they too can beautifully bear the burden on their backs, using others, and we can go on. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Paul Short. I'm a student at the University of San Diego, and this summer, thanks to the Pulitzer Center, I was able to travel through Istanbul and parts of Turkey, looking at the rapid urbanization and the effects of what has been happening. I traveled through various neighborhoods, speaking with displaced residents and residents, and learned from many different experts housing rights activists, and people who live there. Just a brief history to set this off in context. Istanbul was a city of approximately 1 million throughout the 1950s. Around the 1950s, this rapidly changed as their population grew from 1 million, sorry, from 1 million to approximately 6 million by 1985. Today, it's estimated at around 14 million, but it's actually more like 17 million in a city that's roughly twice the size of San Diego. During these 3 decades of growth, the most interesting fact with Istanbul is that the government actually didn't do anything for the people that were moving there. So all of the people that immigrated to the city were forced to cope with their housing needs themselves. This resulted in a phenomenon known as the Gecekondu. The Gecekondu are a form of settlement that people built on treasury land in order to accommodate their needs. These are illegal squatter houses, but as you can see, they're not necessarily slums. These were all built with self-help and improvement in mind. So you can see across the top 3 bars almost sticking out. The story behind that is that during government change and elections, people would actually look to the government and an elected official to give an overt or covert signal that they weren't willing to enforce housing. And this would result in Gecekondu becoming 2 stories and then 3 stories. And this continued throughout the city. In 1984, this changed though, as the government, in order to combat the rapid growth and spread of the city through Gecekondu, legalized most of the Gecekondu, and this allowed people to purchase their land or were given up their land. Through this process, the newly landed residents that own their land were now able to build it up legally. So small-time contractors, private investors, small developers, they changed the city from the short 2-story buildings to this picture, which is roughly 5-story apartment blocks, and this is what most of the city look like today. And that gives you this startling fact. This is one of the oldest cities in the world, yet it's mostly less than 30 years old. It was also during this time, though, that in the 1980s that they decided to make a housing administration finally. So 30 years after the initiation of the population growth, they decided to build TOKİ, the Turkish administration for mass housing. And TOKİ is a totally government-run administration and was really only effective post-2000. In the year 2000, the new government populist party came to power, AKP, the Justice and Development Party, which allowed for implementation of a new agenda. This new agenda included changing TOKİ from a bank-like existence into a streamlined developer, contractor, and land speculator. So just to go through my research, I'm going to do a quick survey of 4 of the locations that I went to. In Istanbul, various types of housing still remain, so very rarely you can actually find an existing Gecekondu. These are mostly torn down, changed, or nothing of what they were, but you can find them if you go far enough on the outskirts of the city. This place is called Şahintepe, and this is in the master planned area of a location that's sadly going to be redone and redeveloped into something else. The skyline of this one is all new housing, and this area is, in the next 20 years, going to be completely different. The people here, actually, it's very important to note that Gecekondu are a community-based lifestyle. What the people here do is they support each other through the communal ties, and people look after each other's children. So this is actually like 6 families, and one lady's watching off on the side and laughing at me as I get inundated with kids saying, "Take my picture, take my picture." But this is the future of Gecekondu. This is one that's currently under the process of urban transformation. This is Başıbüyük, which is also near the outskirts of the city, except this one's on the Asian side. And Başıbüyük is one of 3 stages completed for their transformation. The first stage was the creation of the towers and the Senate. Around the city, though, around the towers, you still see the Gecekondu as it was. The realtor that was, actually I managed to find a realtor that would talk to us, and he said that all of the towers that you saw were completely occupied at the minute. They're full and nobody can get in them currently. But the government is currently planning on making all of these houses where you see people live into villas. And these people have to live with this on the adjacent hill. This is a private development from Kiptos, which is an upper class housing tower system that was built on top of a ghetto pond. So the cleared out area used to look like the top of that. And this is what the Bashi view will end up with. And then another type that I was able to find is in the city center you find historical renewal. Since the city is very old, you have varying types of architecture that they're trying to preserve and capitalize on for touristic needs. Tarlabaşı is a 5-minute walk from the main tourist district in the center of Istanbul, and is actually slated and mostly completed into a historical renewal project. This one, Tarlabaşı is special because it is a 19th century Art Nouveau architectural style that the government decided to use in order to change into a tourist village. The people that lived here before were originally Greek and Armenian middle class, but after the Ottoman Empire fell, they slowly left or were kicked out, and that was replaced with the urban working poor. In 2000s, after the shift in government power, it was selected by the municipality without the input of the people living there to be turned into upper class somewhere that they were moving to. Mujahideen Yakupci was actually the head of the Chamber of Architects in Istanbul, and she was explaining to me that this is a gentrification project, but it's much more than just a gentrification project. It's the starting note of the gentrification of the entire area. So this was planned and conceived not for the people of the area. And then this is a completed historical renewal in the area called Selin, and this actually is a historical renewal. Those buildings are all less than 4 years old. The historical renewal entailed starting from the ground up. So one day the buildings were there, and the next day were gone. This area was populated by Roma gypsies. So that's the poorest, lowest economic group in all of Istanbul. And these people were simply removed because it was their ancestral home, yet because they lived there for so long, many of them actually did not have titles to the house, and they couldn't defend it. This now is populated by the wealthy and Syrian refugees, and the very few Roma gypsies that were able to find a job that's stable enough to work throughout. And then you come into mass housing, and this is the solution that Turkey has for the future. This is in Kayabashi, which is the largest Turkey initiative for social housing in Istanbul. These towers are actually all 1 unit, so the entire length of one is 2 bedrooms, and that goes throughout all of them, either 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, or 4-bedroom. Many of the people or experts that I spoke with were all complaining about the same thing. These towers are not conducive to the urban environment that is found in Turkey and Istanbul that makes it so wonderful. So communities are removed from their gece condu and stuck in these towers, but in doing so, Cihan Baysal explained to me that the community ties that they have are torn apart, they're broken. So they no longer have the support system to help them with all of their daily issues. So you see here in the mass housing units, the children play, no adults visible. And then when you go into somewhere else, like a Roma neighborhood, this is Sarayeville, which is the last remaining Roma stronghold you can really find in the city, and it's a completely different polarized picture. And so this results in the idea that the rapid urbanization of Istanbul is an incredible social progress that's happening. And this project is very uncertain in its outcomes, and therefore it's interesting to sociologists, architects, urban planners, and everybody. And it to the city people and citizens of the city is owed to them that we look into this and follow through, so that if any problems arise, they can be avoided in the rapid urbanization of many of the and I'd just like to make some acknowledgements. Firstly, to the Crisis Reporting Center, because I could not have done this without you guys. It's fantastic help. And then Trio McNair, who's also a program that helped finance this. And then, of course, my university. I'd also like to acknowledge a few mentors. Dr. Jalesa was actually my teacher who went through it after my translator and made sure I didn't get too horribly lost. Em Sawyer, I couldn't have written anything without you. And then everybody who was willing to actually take time and speak with me when their busy schedule and their summer break vacations, both academics and people. Thank you. Yeah, there's actually a rap group that's based out of Selin. It's a political activist right group where they rap about the issues that are happening.
Very impressive.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Well, prior to winning the fellowship, I was actually doing another project for journalism class, for a multimedia journalism class. And in it, I was focusing on immigration with illegal Latinos. And I was told, and I was approached by my teacher at the time, Mr. Eric Luther. He told me to look into this upcoming opportunity to apply for the Pulitzer Fellowship. And I was just like, oh, I don't know. I have no idea what I would do. So you guys wanted some international reporting, and I had already covered Latinos in America. So I told my friend about it and in France, and she told me about two local Roma teens in France who had been escorted off of a bus in front of their classmates, like criminals, and they were ousted. Them and their families were sent back to their country of origin. And I just couldn't believe this. This is exactly the type of things I was talking about in my report here. And this sort of thing was happening over there, just with a different group. And so that led me to look into this matter, into the Roma, and struggle to integrate them in France. And prior to going to France, I'd done my research and read everything from news articles to reports. And I realized that some people were confused about who the Roma were exactly. And so I just wanted to give you guys a little overview of who they are. The Roma are an Indo-Aryan ethnic group. There are 10 to 12 million in Europe today, 20,000 residing in France. The Roma have a cultural history that's rich with oral tradition, and they have a language based on, it's called Romani, and it's based on Sanskrit. They place a strong emphasis on family, and I would learn that later on when conducting interviews with my subject, Morella. I'm grateful. And they have a long history of persecution in Europe. They've been forced to assimilate. Often they've been killed, and also during World War II, the Nazis also killed hundreds of thousands of Roma. Roma today face similar challenges around the world. Most of them are illiterate, have a high infant mortality rate, struggle with unemployment and segregation in education. And factors that contribute to them having the shortest life expectancy in Europe are malnutrition, hunger, living in squalid housing without plumbing or sanitation, and substandard healthcare. So I definitely needed to talk a little bit about some popular beliefs about the Roma, because if you read about them, in the media you're confronted with the same news coverage about them, whether it's portraying them as people who can't get with the times, who are unable to integrate, or just people who are unwilling to integrate. And so while reading articles about the Roma, I noticed they were often referred to as travelers, which is also a mistake, since the French term for travelers is an administrative term which has been used since the 70s, and it refers to not only Roma, but Sinti, Manouche, Gitanos, Gitans, and other nomadic people who are non-Roma, actually. So travelers can actually refer to French citizens as opposed to the term Roma, um, which is used to refer exclusively to people who hail from Eastern European countries. So that was important for me to put in there. Um, Now, one of the things I needed to get clear about when I wrote my articles was who exactly I was talking about, because as you can see, travelers can refer to a whole bunch of different sets of groups. So I had to contact NGOs and different associations and help me get clear exactly about who's here, who's the problem, what's the problem, and what's the best way to tackle the issue. Um, Not long before I started conducting interviews, I was confronted by some of Parisians, some of their yeah, some of their preconceptions about the Roma. My friend would often tell me before I left the house, she'd say things like, "Be careful with your stuff. I know you're going to see them. You know, you need to put your stuff away and come home safe. Come home early, please." And I was just like, "I'm from New York." So many Parisians see Roma as beggars on the streets, as criminals and prostitutes, and there's even some have even told me that they suspect that Roma will actually mutilate their children just to earn more in begging, which is something that they do in India, I believe. But in any case, so it was really important for me to get the story right and to talk about people from the actual community and get their perspective on what's going on. Before conducting interviews, so in my articles, I wanted to emphasize that the Roma are people just like me and you. Because of this whole in-group, out-group bias that the French seem to have about them, I just wanted to really emphasize the fact that the Roma have issues with finding employment, getting health coverage. Um, um, they're interested in having their children get good education and being successful. And so that was important for me. I wanted that to come across in my articles. So another thing that was an issue that I realized while I was reporting was how vocal some politicians were against the Roma. For example, Mr. Paul right here, and also the former Interior Minister, Manuel Valls, who said bluntly that the Roma should go back to Romania and Bulgaria and stay there. And Paul says, what can the Interior Minister do other than concentrate their foreign populations into camp, where they would no doubt feel that life there was so far removed from their traveling lifestyle that they would rather leave such an inhospitable country. And when I talked to some of the NGOs, particularly Oliver Defoe, who's the director of Medicine du Monde, he said that he had noticed in the last 2 to 3 years an increase in violence against Roma, and he suspects that it's probably because of the outspokenness of some of France's leaders in opposition to the Roma. And he says that whenever a politician is that outspoken about this type of opposition, that he feels that it gives people permission to be openly racist as well. And obviously that is an issue. In a study released by the European Roma Rights Center in July of 2014, they found that half of all Roma migrants have experienced discrimination in France, and that in the study, Roma responded that they were commonly faced with hate speeches and verbal attack, and that they were made to feel ashamed. And that was something that Mirella, my subject, told me a lot about, is that wherever she went, she felt that her presence wasn't wanted and that she shouldn't be there. In fact, actually, while at a cafe, conducting the interview with Marilla, I noticed that after about 10 minutes, when some of the French guys had left the area we were in, the owner had put the thing blocking the shade up. And so we were in the sun during the interview. And about 20 minutes later, when other people sat down, kind of to us, they put it back down. So I thought that was very interesting. The Roma issue has many layers, and I did not have a lot of time to tackle all of it, but I just wanted you guys to know that in today's uncertain economic times, it appears the issue affecting the average Parisian, such as finding work and leaving housing, also plagues the Roma. The concerns surrounding the Roma question seem to be less about migration and more about poverty and social inequality. So for more on that, we
All right. My name is Molly Dutmers. I'm a senior at Westchester University in North Carolina, where I'm studying communication and journalism. And this summer, I had the opportunity to travel to France, Italy, and Malta to investigate church attendance, identification, and trends of practice in the Catholic Church. And I especially focused on the millennial generations, ages 18 to 30, about. And I was also investigating the effect that the new Pope, Pope Francis, has had, Francis effect, and I was also looking at how the Catholic Church is reacting to these trends. Church attendance in Catholicism has decreased steadily over the past decade. In the United States, about 40% of Catholics attend Mass weekly or on a regular basis, and that's actually much higher than anywhere else in Europe, really. In France, it's about 4.5% of Catholics that regularly attend Mass. And France is one of the most secularized countries in Europe. And even though they have a population of about 60% of their population identifies as Catholic, only about 4.5% attend Mass regularly. And in Italy, which is the center of Catholicism, the Vatican, Francis there, about 30% of people will claim that they attend Mass, while a longitudinal study actually took the statistic at closer to 18%. So they investigated that for years and kind of figured out like most people say 18 to 22% attending to regularly attending Mass. Malta, which is one of Europe's most Catholic countries, the population of Malta, 98% of them are Catholic, and the Constitution of Malta actually classifies Roman Catholicism as a state religion, and then this specifies Malta's small island nation called Sicily. A lot of people actually but with a population of 98% Catholic, and they're one of the most traditional Catholic countries, and religious guidelines, about 51% attend church regularly, and that has really fallen off in the past few years. But some people have become more re-engaged with the Catholic Church in the wake of Pope Francis becoming Pope. He's incredibly popular in Europe, about as popular as Pope John Paul II and John Paul XXIII, or John the XXIII. And people just love him. I was able to attend a papal event in the Roman neighborhood of Trastevere, which is a Spain, more of a working class neighborhood, and it's also home to the Sada Baggio community, which is a community of lay people that has offices and members from all around the world. And we visited the Basilica in Trastevere, and people were talking to him when I was there. And there were so many people there, despite it was very rain. This was kind of one of the events that I really witnessed the power that Pope Francis has. It was pouring rain, but there were still thousands of people there. He was able with their umbrellas up. And it took Pope Francis arrived outside the square, then he walked in the square, and he was going to the square, which was right there. It took him over an hour to get through all these crowds. He was watching people on the way, he was stopping and talking to people. Somebody was handing him a fountain drink, and I'm like, there's no way he's going to drink this. There's no way the security guards are going to let him drink that. But they did, and thankfully nothing happened. But he's really the people's coach. He said that he's not going to use the code rodeo. He really wants to be with the people, and there's a sense of a lot of people who I've talked to. I'm speaking with a Jesuit priest, and they think that he has a sense of urgency because he is older, he's not in the best health, he has one lung. So there's a sense of urgency. He wants to meet as many people as possible. He wants to speak with as many people, and I think that he's kind of really has become the people's coach. He's like a rock star. People are fighting to get near him. People are fighting to touch him, take pictures, just any interaction they can have with him. They want it. And I think that also kind of the power that he has is evident in the religious souvenir stands around Rome. There's a lot of Pope Paul II memorabilia. There's Philip. And there's more kind of religious tickets here some people outside the mountain looking at these. And there's a lot of, you can really tell me that there's a lot of comic books with Pope Francis items and a lot of Pope Paul II. Not so many Benedict items. I actually had trouble finding any, and then I found one, and it was on sale, so I kind of felt bad. It was like less than, it was like 25 euro cents or something. But yeah, so calendars, t-shirts everywhere, and people were buying it. It was surprising. But while Pope Francis can keep people's interest in the church, he might get them to go maybe attend mass or something. He can't do the driving force. Kind of still with the diocesan priests and priests elsewhere kind of have to take that bring people back to the church themselves. And many people still view the church as too traditional. Even though Pope Francis is willing to have conversations about homosexuality in the church, and so on, a lot of young people, the millennials, still view the church as too traditional. And in Malta, which is, like I said, one of the most Catholic countries, this is just a woman who I saw praying in a public park, which I just found really fascinating. But there's religious icons everywhere, several churches, churches or masses multiple times a day. And Malta, which is very traditional, so it's practically Catholicism, is kind of working to change how the people of Malta are looking at the church. And Malta is actually so traditionalist that the divorce wasn't legal until 2011. And they changed that, so I was able to speak with 4 officials from the Archbishop's office in Malta, 2 of them were priests, and one of them was a youth director. And we kind of talked about the increasingly secularized culture in Europe and how that was affecting Malta and then countries outside of Malta in Europe. And they kind of talked about the supermarket mentality or the it's more commonly referred to as Epicurean Catholicism, meaning we get to pick and choose kind of what applies to your life. And kind of see, pick what you do, so you're not saying that you accept all of the principles of the church, but more what applies to you, what you can work with. And a lot of times, priests and members of the church have come to straying away from that, so that you try to put your text and have time on all that the church has to offer and trying to do most of their principles. But now, especially in Malta, which is they're going to start using this to their favor. And they want to kind of, they're working especially because they're the most traditionalist education. They're trying to repackage Catholicism and trying to embrace the supermarket mentality that they think that their members have, and use that to attract people. So it's fine if you disagree with the church on divorce. It's fine if you disagree with the church on homosexuality. We want you, if you love God and you want to be a part of the church, they want them back. So they have been working to kind of revamp their reputation and create a more secularized way of living their faith, which is what they describe that as. So they're kind of beginning to stay away from the traditional education and work more and more to create something that's practical and give people a practical way of living their faith. So they're more and more willing to kind of make something that's relevant, especially for the youth. And they're hoping that the people who reattach to the church. A lot of times, it's hard to figure out exactly what is correct with millennials in the Catholic Church because there's a sociological trend that happens in all religions of detachment and reattachment. Detachment, most of the time when people leave their homes to go to university or go out and work on their own and are not living with their family and practicing those familial values. The detachment of institutions, including religion, which happens at about ages 18 and 19. And then when they start their own families, they're able to reattach. Kind of, they want to come back and practice their faith, raise their children with in the same institutions and with the same values that they had grown up. And so it's kind of hard because millennials are just the oldest type of millennial is just hitting that 28 to 30 years old, which is typically when some people settle down and start their own families. And so in the next few years, it'll be really interesting to see if that reattachment trend does occur. Because if it doesn't, the Catholic Church is not in the best position because they lose their influence, power, they have more difficulty fundraising and doing outreach. It's less and less people. If the children of millennials, are raised Catholic, they obviously lose kind of some of their power and influence, and they're very influential to run office as well. So they kind of have an outreach program larger, and they have more and more people kind of coming in, and more and more people kind of view the Pope as a world leader, and it's kind of reattachment and continued dissenters continues to happen. The Catholic Church is confused in the with future larger issues and within Catholicism. And that's what I'm really going to focus on. And I just want to thank the Pulitzer Center. It was great working with everyone. And also, it was so informative to hear everyone's presentation. Really good.
I would like to second that. It was very informative. Absolutely wonderful to hear everything. Why don't you move your chairs that way and then we'll take questions? Molly,
Excuse me.
oh,
You
she
have to
can,
have
oh, okay. You can't, maybe she repeats the question.
it works better with
Okay,
one.
right, yes, you're right.
This question for Molly. So is this talk like the church trying to kind of allow people to come in and practice a casual faith? Like when you said they're trying to bring these people back into the church, is it just to get them there through that front door and then so they kind of convince you that you're wrong? Or, I mean, I'm just wondering if you've seen anything like that in your day.
No, I actually saw, I guess the opposite. When I was talking to these priests in Malta is the most traditionalist country that I went to. He was talking to give an example, Father Charles Capone, who's also, I don't know if he was also scholars of religion, but he was talking about how he was one of his, the people in his parish was talking to him, and he said, oh, we got married this weekend, and they weren't able to get married in the church because they had been divorced. And he said, oh, why didn't you invite me? And they were so shocked that he would have wanted to go to their wedding, even though it was outside of the church, and even though it was something that maybe he is not always supportive of divorce, that he was supportive enough of them that he would want to go and see their wedding, even though it was taking place outside of the church. And so, from what I've heard, it's more people have the reputation or the idea that the church is going to be too traditionalist, and that most people, instead of it actually being that traditional and that strict and that rigid, and that the church is more open than people think. It's kind of the impression that I was getting. Thank you.
I have a question for Jalesa. Are there any, are there any examples in French culture or even in other places in Europe of Roma families who have
become maybe politicians or become active in society, or is that
Yeah, definitely. There are some Roma people who do rise above their situations and circumstances to become very active members in the community. I can't think of someone right now, but there was a woman that everyone kept telling me about, and she was in, I think she was an active member in the French government. I just cannot remember her name and her position. But definitely, just like the overwhelming majority of them do not for lots of different reasons.
I have a question for both Paul and Jalesa. The first was that did you notice if there was any and how big a support community through like did they have a big was there a big following of supporting because it seemed like there was a lot of negative uh, stigmatization of those people. So I was wondering how you know support that.
Well, there is lots of support for Roma. There are a lot of pro-Roma people in France, and there are a lot of more pro-Roma, pro-Roma organizations in France. That NGOs are specifically there to help them. Unfortunately, I feel like when tackling the Roma question, sometimes the argument, like the depictions of the Roma is very one-sided, and that is what sits in the minds of the French people, and so that is how they know the Roma as. And being that the Roma are very, very private, it's very hard to change that the opinion of the general population to support these people.
And um, when they're when you do development, when they just like destroy these entire neighborhoods, are there know ways that are put in place for these people who got their neighborhoods destroyed, a fast track into housing development, or what happens to them after their neighborhood is knocked down, literally what kind of support
That's actually kind of an interesting question. For the most part, most of the neighborhoods that they target, the people that live there are do actually own the title of the land, so it's the neighbor county land or from federal land. So they they are already in a new incentive, but the government does offer them some sort of incentive to move. Um, they don't give you an option to not move though. So they offer them the incentive like in these new towers in China, we will give you a unit and your land that you're on right now is down to your work. So they create an entire system of people that are now living off of mortgage to pay for the units. And they don't offer you any subsidies, or they only offer you with the subsidies to pay for these houses. So a family would be removed from their house and live in a smaller house in the loose towers, and then the tower costs I think monthly payment for one of them is 1,600 million a month, which is $1 billion US. And then they have to figure out how to come up with that much money, the budget that they didn't actually have before. So in this case of Roma people, continue talking about Roma in Istanbul, they make roughly $600, 600 lira a month. So some of these housing options when they're removed aren't affordable to them. So for the most part, many of these people would get into their houses, they would be evicted from the first, move into the second, and the second they would evict these communities people to the new people living in the towers as well. And then they would just be absorbed by the city of the neighborhood that they protected. But for the most part, maybe these things can't be protected.
This is for you. How integrated are the Syrian refugees in Turkey, and what are the interactions like between these refugees and other people in Turkey?
Um, well, they're not very integrated at all. It's a two-part answer because some of the refugees who are fleeing to Jordan, Turkey, they are living mostly in camps, primarily in camps. Those respective governments are funding the camps almost entirely on their own backs. Turkey actually, interestingly enough, denied international support when it was being offered. And now they really and in the camps, people are, surrounded by Syrians. They're Syrian on the front, they're Syrian. They're not learning Turkish. Though the schools that are offered, which is such a huge plus, like there are schools and hospitals and things like that within the camps, they're not assimilation oriented. For people who are living outside of the camps, I think it's about, I would say, a sixth of the refugee population. They aren't they aren't assimilated at all, and most of them left the camps voluntarily, because for whatever reasons, there are actually a variety of reasons. But they left the camps, and most of them are villagers from Syria, so they have nothing in the first place, and now they're just trying to make ends meet, and it's very hard to, it's very hard to because Turkish xenophobia, a fear of these refugees is increasing every single day. So they're not being taught the language, they're not being welcomed by locals, they're being taken advantage of at markets, they're being charged extortionately for rent in what used to be a house stable. And they're struggling, and there's really, unfortunately, no light at the end of the tunnel. They really don't see how to sustain themselves. Turkey is working on sustaining refugee population. It's not active, it's not. It's not proactive. And everyone's kind of just teetering on a day to day instead of planning for a future. For the refugees.
My question is to Lisa. How did the Roma get to be in France? And if the conditions are really bad for them and they're traveling people, why don't they?
Okay, so the Roma are an Indo-Aryan ethnic group. So they actually came from India. They migrated to Europe about 1,500 years ago. And they mostly reside in Eastern Europe. But the conditions in Eastern Europe, such as like Romania and Bulgaria specifically, are so bad that they'd rather live in France. So that's the whole thing. They'd rather stay in France, they'd rather beg, they'd rather live in these squalid camps than be in their home country where they have no chance to advance at all.
So my question is to Paul. I just want to ask because China is having a similar situation with Istanbul right now. That when the government let people move from their house to the new places the government built for them, the people who originally living in that part, they try to fight with the government and try to take a disadvantage that they eventually gonna move, but the longer they stay there, the government gonna pay them more or give them a better house. It's become a social conflict in China. I want to know if there are any similar situations in Turkey or how the government is handling this, like moving people from this part to that part. Thank you.
Actually, in Turkey, a major problem is how they get the land of people. UN housing rights states that you can't forcefully evict people. Yet in the last 10 years, they've created two laws. One of them is targets historical and legal sites, is actually implemented in both Syria and Parliament, which gives the government the right to evict or expedite the evict, like in times of war, which it was previously reserved for, the people out and give them fair market value. They never actually evicted anybody, but the threat was enough that the people would sell. And in both cases, the people actually didn't necessarily always get full market value. So the government would do insider trading like deals and the private developers that they would sell to and say the same thing about maybe doing this over here, so they start buying land earlier before the people knew about it, so they would be selling it sooner. So all of the housing and land property was actually acquired at a very low price compared to what they were getting.
there any questions? Well, I think we're wrapping up now. But